You got the biggest lost tomorrow. It's Toronto. Where? Where in Toronto? Okay, so east side. You know we're in Oakland. I know, I mean.
لكن قلت كذا مش ليش دعوة هنا في أمريكا مش من مصر.
Another, which Egypt. Fine. So, real quick, I'm sure you've been given intros. Welcome to Medina. Few recommendations. First of all, my name is Muhammad Nikhil. Obviously, you may have heard. I'll be teaching you a few things throughout the year. Based on my availability, you have to work with me a little bit on that. For you to take this year off is a great effort and sacrifice on your part. You will totally waste it if you don't really use it, in my view, especially if you're planning to take just the 1 year. But even if you're not, and the way you use it is, there is no spoon feeding. You have to actually be self-motivated, self-starter to study and read. That's my recommendation to you. And all of you all are adults, so there is no point pushing you to do so, except for reminders. I will do that, but you have to have your own schedule of studying and reading. And don't worry about the pattern in the class, meaning how far or how fast, because people sometimes are either slower or faster. What I would ask you, though, is to ask me or the teachers for recommended readings. This way that you're not, first of all, for a couple of reasons. Who's a native Arab speaker, meaning reader? Who reads it other than the Egyptians? None. So I have bad news for y'all. The English library is terrible, meaning there is really no good material in English to be read. Most of the English books, Islamic books in English, are copy-paste and a terrible attempt at that, mostly that are recent. Even the Quranic translation in English, as you know, has serious defects. Almost all of them. I have not seen one without problems. So therefore, you really need to develop a pattern of reading in order for you to get the most out of this 1 year, which I would like you to get. My objectives, or our objectives at Medina for you is, number one, to introduce you to Islam. Now you say, hey, I'm already in Islam. You may be, but introduce you to Islam from an academic perspective. And what I mean by academic perspective is a neutrally academic. And I want to put million lines under neutral. Now you may have researched Medina or researched me personally or other teachers or so, and you found, let's say, or you deduced that I am affiliated in my views are this, my views are that. We don't teach my views here. I don't teach you my views. Neutrally academic means two things. You have to know that and always be around it. First is the Quran, and number two will be the Sunnah. That's going to be the access of what we're going to be teaching. I definitely have my own ways and madhab and views about many things like most of you do. But I don't teach you here my way. I do not indoctrinate people. But I will challenge you in the ways I think are right. So, there is empowerment, not indoctrination. So, if you've heard that, Sheikh Muhammad leans towards Sufism, let's say, I'm not going to try to make you Sufis. If you've heard that, Medina is Ash'ari versus Salafi, I'm not trying to make you Ash'ari versus Salafi. I really don't care what you become, to be honest with you. So long you're balanced around the Quran and the Sunnah. Alright? We all have our own passions, but we're not here to teach passions, because that would be betrayal of what the Quran and Sunnah entails. I urge you to question me, to disagree with me in the class. If you want, raise your hand. If you have a point, disagree all you want. I will not have any issue with that. I want you to cultivate the clash of minds. I ask you to please cultivate. I hate for you to be yes people. It means you don't think. That's not the point of this course. The point of this course that eventually you become leaders. You say, I can become leader in 1 year? Yeah, you're not going to become a scholar in a year. But you'll be a student scholar in a year. You should be if you're serious. If you're not serious and you're just going to pass time and pass the course, then you might be a good activist in your community in 1 year, where you guide people. So, because if you know, if you've been exposed to knowledge, at least you know what's extreme. You know what's wrong. You know what's way out there. So you provide leadership, even if you're not at a caliber of being a student of knowledge, or a leader per se. But you are then as well. And that's very important. Today, in lots of masajid across America, leadership is not there. Social activist and political activist leadership is there. Yes, plenty in fact, which is good. Don't take me, I'm not against it. I am for it. I'm just not one. And don't expect me to be everything, because I am not. So I will not be teaching you politics. I don't really care about politics. I'm not a social activist, though I think it's very important, and I think political activism is also important. I'm just an academic person. I'm not that. There must be somebody for that. All right. So I'm not against it. You want to be that? Bismillah. God bless you. But there are very few academic leaders in America today. In my view, the atmosphere in the United States, it's a preacher's world at best. And I need you to differentiate in my classes between preacher or preaching and teaching. Yani in Arabic language, ilm and wa'z. In Arabic language means preaching. Maybe those of you who are Urdu speaking, you might say vaz. Right? And that is what? What is preaching usually, y'all? So usually feel-good lectures, right? It's feel-good lectures. It is trying to remind you with Islam, with Allah, make you feel good, to scare you a little bit, to motivate you a little bit. Yeah, you've been to conferences? And you know, it's usually all preaching, but also in most mosques, so it's almost all preaching. Teaching involves a proper academic structure. It's just like you go to a university. You can't go to a master's level before you have a bachelor's level. And what determines a master's versus a bachelor's versus a PhD? What determines the depth and breadth of the material that you engage with. Depth and breadth. So in my classes, I'm going to go this academic route. And we try to do that in general here. More teaching, no preaching. Preaching in Jummah outside, when we sit for a talk or whatever it is. But in the class, there's going to be teaching. And that's foundational. If you don't have teaching, your preaching could be seriously off, because you don't know the boundaries. You don't know what's right, what's wrong. And you hear that in conferences and all the time, and I hear them until today, every day. All right. One last thing before we start also is ilm, or knowledge, like raw knowledge, is a bit difficult for those who are not used to it. Like to me, it's music to my ears in the sense, because I'm just used to it, not because I'm super smart or anything special. But I'm a bookworm. You put me with books, come back, see me in 3 days. I don't mind. I have no problem with that whatsoever. Now, I'm not asking you all to be bookworms. You don't have to be. But you have to have time of reading daily. Start with at least 25 pages a day where you must read. No way, you can't. So you have to go through that. Why? You need to develop a skill of reading and researching on your own. My job here is to try to help you become that. Now you say, I'm only here for a year. Next year I'm going to go back to engineering, or I'm going to go and become an IT professional, or I'm going to be a journalist or a manager. I'm not in this like for, do I really need to? Yes, you need to learn how to read. And I don't mean Facebook posts or Twitter or Instagram or whatever. That's not reading. Proper reading of books. Hence, again, we're going back. Ask for recommended readings and go through them. And then, the beauty of you being in person in the course is you come and ask questions. I don't have a problem. In fact, I want to solicit that, not just welcome it, that you all went and read a book that's an academic book. Now, don't give me the stories, books, and copy-paste business. All right? But you read an academic book and you have questions and problems. I mean, wonderful. So you can be ahead of the curve, which you should be. By mere signing up for the course means you want to know your faith. And faith is only two things, the Quran and the Sunnah, and what relates to them. The last thing before I say anything about that is you need to have some, I don't like to use the word, I used to use the word spiritual. I don't use it anymore. The reason for it is everybody uses the word spiritual for different meanings. So you know what, scrap it, because you need to define it. But you need to have an understanding that you will not learn about Allah without Him. You won't learn. You will not learn about Him without Him. You will not learn about His revelation and faith that He revealed without His blessings and permission and facilitation. Facilitation. If He does not facilitate for you, you could be in front of religious books for decades and you won't learn. You have to ask Him continuously to teach you that which is beneficial, to help you learn and retain, to bless the knowledge that you're learning, and to allow you to learn about Him. This must be something that you all do on daily basis. Now, I don't care what dua you come up with, or you follow a dua that's already there. That's up to you. So what if you don't have any certain specific dua or what? You need to be in school. You're in school here, and the school that you should have is this. You have to have tahajjud. I'm not telling you tahajjud is fard. If you don't have tahajjud, you will not be refined. Never. Islamically speaking. I'm sorry to say that. If you don't have tahajjud, you will never be refined Islamically speaking. Your ruthless nafs is ruling you, right, left, and center. You will never be disciplined. What's the minimum I'm asking you? 2 rak'ah at 2 a.m. with 2 tears. So 2, 2, 2. 2 units only. But you have to sleep. Wake up for it, because otherwise it's, you're cheating. 2 rak'ah, 2 a.m., 2 tears. Then you grow it to 4, 4, 4. This may constitute your permission of him, from him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, daily. You imploring his blessings for your journey. And also his facilitation for you to learn. Rest assured, you will not learn without that. You say, I'm smart, I can copy. There will be no barakah in your knowledge. This is a must. How often? How often can you do it? But no less than once a week. And you need the two-tier part, because you need to be present. That's very, very important for your own refinement, Islamically speaking. You have to develop your own connection with Allah Azza wa Jalla, independent of anyone. And if y'all are living, some of y'all are living together, friends or so, do it separately. Because you might be, you don't want to cry in front of someone, or you don't want to speak your sins in front of someone, or whatever it is. So do it on your own. But you must do that. Not must meaning on a recommended level, not on an obligate. I can't legislate. You have to do this if you want to succeed. Even if you want to succeed as just a religious or a person of faith who doesn't know anything, you have to do this. For your own akhlaq, for your own connectedness with Allah Azza wa Jalla. All right, with that, I think we'll stop, and then we'll start with it. So we're starting the Tahawiyya Mulana, or what are we starting? Okay. So let's start this text of Aqidah. You'll see me drawing this, and I think it's useful for me and you anyway. The Prophet ﷺ announced his message in which city? Mecca or Medina? For how many years did the Prophet ﷺ stay in Mecca? 13 years. Then this was the point of hijrah, or migration, to Medina. How many years did the Prophet ﷺ stay in Mecca and Medina?
13.
10 years. That's very important. So the longer time was Mecca or Medina, y'all?
Mecca.
Mecca? Mecca was the 13 years. Very important. Very nice. As you already know, or you should know, did the Prophet ﷺ do Hajj with the Muslims when he was in Mecca?
No.
When did the Prophet ﷺ do Hajj first, ever, and last? For him, alayhi wasallam. When? Yes, anybody knows? Go ahead. Yeah. Hajjat al-Wada. Only one time. That was in Medina, all the way before departure, before passing away. How about zakah? When was zakah made obligatory? Anyone knows?
2 after Hijrah.
Second year after Hijrah, so that's Medina. Salah, when did Salah, the 5 times Salah, become obligatory? Who knows? When was, yes? Isra and Miraj. When did Isra and Miraj take place? Like on that scale there? Yes.
10th year before Hijrah.
What?
10th year, Makkah.
10th year before, 13th, most likely. Right before Hijrah. So you have now Hajj, Zakah, Siyam, Salah. All of them were not mandated throughout the bulk of the Meccan phase. 13 years, the longer time. So what do you mean? But that's what people call Islam today. The practice of the rituals, right? Well, what was then happening in Mecca? What was the Prophet ﷺ doing in Mecca for 13 years? 13 long and hard years where blood was shed, people were hurt, yes.
Teaching Tawheed.
And
That's what I was gonna say.
Akhlaq, two things. So, Tawheed and Akhlaq. And therefore, we can characterize the Medinan phase by fiqh. Fiqh, which means now we're doing salah, siyam, zakah, hajj. Much more. That's when the ahkam were revealed. But in Mecca was tawheed and akhlaq. What does tawheed mean? What does tawheed mean? Go on.
The oneness of Allah subhanahu.
Believe in the oneness of Allah subhanahu.
Oneness. All right, I like the word oneness. Don't use any other word unless you like check it a million times. I don't like the word unity. I don't know what other words people use. Oneness. From wahda, wahid, one. Yeah? The absolute oneness. Hey, what do you mean oneness? What does the oneness of Allah mean anyway? Like when we say Allah Azza wa Jal is the one, what do we mean by that? Yes, sir.
Not in the way of numbers, because numbers are divisible.
And
The soul by itself is nothing like it. Individuality, there's no replication of before, no after.
That he is in need of no one and we're in need of him always.
so we're talking oneness in every possible way. There is nothing like him. He's the only one in any and everything. That's Tawheed. Nothing is like him. If you associate anything with Allah in anything, you're saying he's not one in that aspect. And that defies Tawheed. Are we there? All right. Well, does that require 13 years? Yeah. Why not? What's the most honorable knowledge you can ever learn? Fiqh or Tawheed?
Tawheed.
100%. Why? Fiqh, you learn how to worship him. Tawheed, you learn about him. Right? Fiqh, you learn how do I worship him. Tawheed, you learn about him. That's much more honorable. What's the second thing the Prophet ﷺ was teaching in Mecca? Akhlaq. What is akhlaq? Huh?
Character.
Character building. Character building. That's what akhlaq is. What do you mean? The Prophet ﷺ was teaching people character? Yes. What do you mean teaching them character? Like, you need to be generous. And going through that generosity, you need to be truthful. You need to be trustworthy. Hey, what was the Prophet ﷺ himself known for before announcing the message? There's two things he was known for. You all remember? As-Sadiqul Amin. Right? You heard that?
Yes.
So Quraysh used to call him As-Sadiq. This was his known name. As-Sadiqul Amin. As-Sadiq means what? The truthful. Al-Amin means what?
Trustworthy.
The trustworthy. Are those characters? Yes. Well, what's important is that you become them, among others. Sadiq, truthful, Amin, trustworthy, generous, selfless, courageous, brave. That took him 13 years, alayhi wasallam, to teach people? Yes, of course. But isn't that what parents should be doing? Yeah, in the old days. What should you do once you become accountable? Even nowadays, if parents are doing that, you continue that process because you're required to refine your own characters. That's your obligation now. Parents did some job, YouTube did the other job. Now you fix yourself and try to be a better person. Why? Well, this message is about akhlaq. Again, you probably heard the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which is Hasan. And where he says, إِنَّمَا وُعِثْتُ أتمم صالح الأخلاق. I like Salih more than Makarim, but also Makarim, for those of you who both of them are okay. Salih is more authentic. I was sent to perfect the foundation of akhlaq. Akhlaq means characters and refinement. I want you to really pay attention to this hadith. The reason for that is because a Muslim that has no good character is not a character flaw, is a faith flaw. Faith problem, not character problem. And you're going to see, you already know this, and I'll give you an example. Have you all heard of the hadith? You would not be, hadith al-Bukhari, you would not be a believer if you're not good to your neighbor? Have you heard that hadith? Hey, wait a minute, you have a question? لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب. One of you would not be a believer until you love for your fellow brother what you love for yourself. Have you heard that too? Yes. Wait a minute. But I mean, loving for you what I love for myself, that has nothing to do with my faith in Allah, does it? This is just a pure character thing. I'm a selfless person. I like to have for you what I like to have for myself. That's a selfless thing. Not harming your neighbor, that's just being a good neighbor. That's akhlaq. That has nothing to do with iman. Why does the Prophet ﷺ start the hadith by saying, La yu'min? One of you would not be a believer in Allah. Whoa. What is he saying? Akhlaq are the practical manifestation of Tawheed. If you believe in Allah, your characters must reflect that. I'll bring another example. Like if I do harm to you and I don't care, I keep doing it, I don't care. Is that just a problem me being oppressive? Or do I have a problem believing that Allah is just and it will catch up with me? Probably the latter. I can't tell you how important this concept is, because what we've done is we've separated these two that the Prophet ﷺ bundled. If you separate these two things, what will you end up having? You'll end up having orthodoxy without orthopraxy. Does that make sense to you? What does that mean? It means I believe, but I don't practice. What I believe is one thing. What I practice in real life is a totally different thing. I believe Allah likes me to be just. I believe Allah likes me to be brave. I believe Allah likes me to be courageous, generous, selfless. But I am all the opposite of that. That doesn't matter. I'm still good. This is how we end up here, is by separating what the Prophet ﷺ first bundled and taught concurrently. And in his ahadith, he told you that you would not be a believer if you don't share. You would not be a believer if you don't care. You would not be a believer if you don't, etc., etc., etc. Right? All these ahadith. And that's very important for you to look at. And I want you today to go and research the hadith of Ahmad. In his Muslim, because the riwayah is Hasana, the hadith of Ja'far bin Abi Talib before the king of East Africa, Abyssinia. The first Muslim expedition at the prophetic order to Africa. Remember that?
Yes.
When they were banished or forced out of their homes in Mecca, and the Prophet ﷺ told them, go to Africa.
Yes.
The one who spoke in front of the king in Africa was Ja'far bin Abi Talib, the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. I want you to look up what he said, and I want you to reflect on that message of what Ja'far said to the king. And here's my reasons why. This is like very early when Muslims were still in Mecca. They haven't even migrated to Medina. This is in the Meccan phase. Right here. This is in this phase, y'all. What I want you to see is this. How did the Meccan Sahaba view Islam in Mecca? Because Ja'far tells the king of Abyssinia what Islam was. I want you to see how much of it is principles, or akhlaq, or morals, or ethics, or refinement, versus rules of fiqh. You're going to be astonished. That shows you what the Sahaba understood Islam to be and why they believed in it. I can't stress it enough. That's one of the earliest accounts from, other than the Quran and the Sunnah, from the view of those who actually embraced the faith, what the faith was to them. You will find that we were not good to our neighbors, we were not good to our family, we were not good to people, we ate any kind of money, halal, haram, doesn't make any difference, we did all kinds of things. You'll see all these akhlaq issues. All right. So this is an intro for you to this, to what we're studying. We're going to go through, unfortunately, here's the bad news. We don't teach akhlaq in the course. Just following the tradition. This was outsourced to parents and mosques in the old days, 1,000 years ago. Eventually, mosques stopped doing that. They started teaching only books. And eventually, parents stopped teaching that because they outsourced them to YouTubers. So, we don't teach akhlaq, and nobody does, unfortunately. Not good. I'm not very happy with it, just so you know. Because it's a troubled field, in the sense we don't know where to start. So in the old days, before Sufism had its bad name, sort of lately in the past 40 years, Sufis used to do that. But also they veered off, a lot of them, and went a bit crazy. So it became a bit cultish. So it defeats the purpose. I started about 4 years ago or so looking at the verses that talk about akhlaq in the Quran. And I am about at 200 pages already and halfway through the Quran, but I did not do anything last year. I did not do anything last year. I thought it was going to be a small booklet about akhlaq in the Quran. And I was just shocked because I went verse by verse. And when you look at the akhlaq containing or instructing verses, like I said, I already am about 200 pages in a Microsoft Word document and I'm halfway through. A lot of them. So, but that's going to be your job. I'll try to give myself a new hints here and there, but that's going to be your job. You have to be able to put yourself as a human being, irrespective of people's faith. They have to put themselves on a trajectory of self-refinement. That's what akhlaq is. Self-refinement. You have to. You have to. None of us is perfect. We're born perfect in a sense, but then we start going down for a little bit. You gotta put yourself on a trajectory of self-refinement. You gotta catch yourself and improve yourself. For if you don't, then you're losing. There's no point of you learning anything if you refuse to undergo self-refinement. There's no point. And you're not impressive. What impresses or what's impressive is akhlaq and self-refinement. I'm impressed by selflessness. I really am. If you really want to impress me, give me an example or a model of selflessness, of selfless generosity, of bravery, of courage. I mean, that's impressive. Learning and memorizing books, that's not impressive. I'm not impressed. Anybody can do that. That's not important. And at the end of the day, you're judged by your tawheed and akhlaq, much more than anything else. That's important. Okay, with this, let's go to the Tahawi text. The reason I chose the Tahawi text, long time ago, I came to this country in 1988. And I found people like teaching different kinds of stuff in mosques at that time. I said, you know what, I did not study that. And then I realized it's whatever books or very recent or people who like recently copy paste. So I always thought when we want to study anything, we should go to the oldest and most uncontested texts, but the oldest possible, rather than new. Old here is gold. Why? It's just, so the Tahawi text is the oldest Aqidah text agreed upon, written in Islam. The oldest in the field. Absolutely the oldest. Written by Imam Tahawi. Imam Tahawi died what, 321? Was it? Something like that. So here in this class, I'll always use the Hijri date. I'm not going to use the Gregorian, right? So when I say, let's say 321, I need 321 of Hijra. Which means what? Which means on this scale, 321 years after migration from Mecca to Medina. That's the Hijri date. Alright? Which means effectively 311 after the prophetic departure, right? Something like that. Just so you have an understanding, because in Islamic studies, everything is based on the Hijri calendar, not the Gregorian calendar. So nothing against Gregory or his calendar. It's just, that's not what our Islamic studies is. All right? So, when we have a text that is about 1100 years old, and everybody sort of likes it and agrees to it, despite their differences, that's a text you should study. More recent people, more recent scholarship is oftentimes, because any scholarship, not just recent, any scholarship is always subject and influenced by its what? By what's happening in its era. Right? It's always like this. You're always impacted by what's happening. Now, when you have something that is about just 300 years after the prophetic departure, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, you have something that's really, really old when things were still more pristine. And the more pristine you get, the better it is. Are we on the same page?
Yes.
Good. Now, in this here, in this school of ours at the Medina Institute, we teach the views of Ahlul Sunnah. In other words, Sunni Muslims. Now, I don't mean this in a sectarian way. I have no bone of hate in me against any Muslim, whether they're people of Bid'ah or people of Sunnah, or any human being, to be honest with you. Even if they don't believe, I still pray for them, and they can only expect good from me, despite my disagreement with their theology. But we teach the views of Ahlul Sunnah. As-Sunnah. Now, Ahl means the people of, right? As-Sunnah means what?
The way of the
The
prophet.
prophetic way. Right? I don't mean your Sunnah or my Sunnah. Which Sunnah do I mean?
The
Because Sunnah
prophetic
means the
way.
way only. Means the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Correct? Very nice. So I'm going to take you now throughout some little bit historical background to tell you how did we emerge? Because you should say the first question, and you should always ask me this, and ask everybody. When someone teaches you something, you always ask for what? Dalil. Dalil means what? Huh? Evidence. What's your evidence? If I teach you, I'm supposed to give you evidence. If I don't have evidence, then you don't have to believe anything I tell you. And when I say evidence, evidence must be one of two things. What? Can I tell you evidence my brother said? How about my neighbor said? How about the friend I really like, he's really cool, he says this. What do you think? How about I tell you I heard one time in a conference, it was really, really cool thing. This is evidence. Is that evidence? What's evidence? Only. Only. Quran and Sunnah constitute foundational evidence. Foundational evidence. What I mean by foundation in Arabic language, I call it ta'sis. Ta'sis, yani foundation. You cannot establish anything without having an evidence from the Quran and Sunnah. Are we there? How about the big scholars, the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, Ahlul Bayt, Awliya, Salihin, Abu Hanifa, Shafi'i, Malik, Ahmad bin Hanbal, Bukhari, Muslim? Can their statement be foundational? Can their statements be foundational? Then what are their statements? Not useful? Yeah, Abu Hanifa, all that is not useful for you? Istiqnas, elucidative. Elucidating. Not foundational, but explanatory of the foundation. The A'imma and the Ulama and the scholars, no matter how big they are, their views and statements they're not foundational, but they are explanational, if I can say that. Explanational of what? Of the foundation. Yes? It's very, very, very important. And therefore, scholars of, which you should be inshallah, students of knowledge, when they ask for the dalil, those who know, when you ask them for dalil, or when they actually, not without asking for dalil, when they substantiate a thing, what do they start with? Allah said this, the Prophet ﷺ said this, Abu Hanifa Shafi'i said this. Are we there? Those who don't know, Sheikh so-so-and said this. Am I listening? Huh? You're talking to a recorder. Leave a message after the beep. Why? I love your Sheikh or your Imam, or even if it's the big Imams that we all agree to, but their statements does not constitute, or their statements do not constitute foundational evidence. Are we there? All right, very important. So you have to learn what I call maratibul adillah. Maratib is the ranking of dalil. Eventually you learn usul, which means the Quran comes before the Sunnah, right? So you don't, when you say, I'll tell you why this is right, because the Prophet ﷺ said, and Allah said, you need a bit of refinement. Why? You say Allah said first. Why? Priority. Then you say what? The Prophet ﷺ said, right? Why? Because there's ranking for each evidence. There's martaba for each evidence. And then obviously you go through that. We'll talk about that some other time. All right. So when I told you we're studying here Ahl Sunnah, the first thing you should say, hey, where is the dalil for the word Ahl Sunnah? Like, is this Quran? Did the Quran say you are Ahl Sunnah, or the Quran say you are Muslims? What did the Quran say? Muslims. هو سماكم المسلمين. Allah did not mention in the Quran that we are Ahlul Sunnah, but He called us what? Muslims, all of us. So what happened? Where did we go? From being Muslims to being Muslims who are Ahlul Sunnah. We did not leave the word Muslims, we just added. Because we started disagreeing. Disagreeing on what? The Quran or on the Sunnah? Because remember, what was Deen again? Deen is what? Quran and Sunnah. So now when the Ummah started disagreeing, and we had to identify ourselves, did we disagree? Does the Ummah today disagree on the Quran or they disagree on the Sunnah? Sunnah. Because Khawarij, Shia, Mu'tazila, all of them, nobody says the Quran is not right. Everybody believes in the Quran. But what do they? Where do they disagree? What the Prophet ﷺ said or did or approved, correct? So that's where we came from. We say, we will be the people of the prophetic Sunnah, which means what? What does that mean? Tell me. What does that mean? When we say we are Ahlul Sunnah, what does that really mean? Tell me. Founders? Followers of the Sunnah. Alright, I need more specific.
We are followers of the prophetic way that has been established through concise, authenticated sources.
It's a very sophisticated way of reiterating what he said.
Like we are the best of mankind.
Whoa, that's very conceited. I mean, I hope not. We don't want to assume that. We're saying that because then Al-Quran Al-Karim says, Kuntum khayra ummah, all of you are the best. So for me to say my group is the best is a bit...
Well, you said, I'm sorry for my understanding of your question was, you said, what are the people who follow the Sunnah?
No. What I said is, what does it mean that we are the people who are Ahlul Sunnah? What does that mean? Yes.
We follow and practice the prophetic way.
All of you have reiterated the same thing, more or less. What it means that, yes, go ahead.
We derive our belief from the Quran.
It's the same thing. It's okay, it's part of the deal. I mean, that's the idea. It means we do not prioritize anything above the Sunnah after the Sunnah. Let me say it again. It means after the Sunnah comes the Quran, and above the Sunnah we do not prioritize any other statement. So we don't say Ahlul Bayt said, and we prioritize over the prophetic Sunnah. Does that make sense to you? For example, with our Shia brothers. We don't say so-and-so said and we prioritize it over the prophetic Sunnah. We are Ahlul Sunnah, which means what? After the Quran, we follow the Sunnah and we do not prioritize anything over the prophetic Sunnah. It is the standard, everything is a follower of it. Does that make sense to you? Yes. Now that's important because other sects, they institutionalize the sayings of their scholars or of their imams, of their leaders. That's where I was going. That's why you might have not understood me, but that's fine. Okay. How did that all emerge? Where did all this come from? Let's go back to history a little bit. And I don't like history. Don't think you should like history either, unless you're a history person. God help you if you're a history person, because you're spending all your life on he said, she said. That's what history is. But at the prophetic time, this is Mecca, this is Medina, this is Hijrah, 10 years, 13 years. What were people called throughout the prophetic era? This is the prophetic era. What were you called? Ahlul Sunnah or Shia or Khawarij? Muslim. Muslim. You embrace the faith, you're a Muslim. You all turning the heater on, is that what it is? Is that the heater?
It's cold.
I hope you're not putting heat on that. I'm gonna send you the sauna, I'm pretty sure. It's nice to have fresh air. Okay. This remained like this after the prophetic era. We have an era we call the era of the Khulafa al-Rashidun. Which literally means the righteous successors. This is a sectarian term. Only Sunni Muslims use it. Other Muslims do not believe in this term. Khulafa al-Rashid, righteous successors. And the first righteous successor is who? Abu Bakr. How long did Abu Bakr rule, y'all? Approximately 2 years. 2.5, kind of. The second righteous successor is who?
Umar.
Omar. How long did he rule? 10 years. The third righteous successor is called Uthman. How long did he rule? Approximately 12 years. The fourth righteous successor is Ali. How long did he rule? Almost 6 years, or 5.5. All right. So now what do you have? You have Abu Bakr 2 years. Prophet ﷺ passed on. Abu Bakr was elected, selected, then elected. 2.5 years. Umar was appointed. 10 years he ruled. Uthman was selected from a group of 6, or elected, I apologize. Selected in a group of 6, then elected from the group of 6. That's more. He ruled for 12 years. Ali then was elected and he ruled for about 5.5 years. This era, Sunni Muslims now, we call it the era of the righteous leaders or righteous successors. During that era, everybody was still called Muslim, just like here. Everybody was called a Muslim here. Here also, everybody was called a Muslim. You could not find any other name. And this lasted about what? 40 years, 30 years? 30 years, more or less. Right? 30 years. How many of the 4 righteous successors were killed, assassinated?
3.
3. That should give you an understanding of how things are. Righteous people, 3 of them were killed, were assassinated. Allah, Uthman. So now this is what? This is now 23 years total. 13 in Mecca, 10 in Medina. That makes it 13 years total, the prophetic era. And that's about 30 years, the righteous successors era. And now I'm looking at about 43 years total, where everybody was called Muslim, more or less. The assassination or the killing of the third righteous Khalifa Uthman was problematic for many reasons. Among them is those who killed him were outwardly Muslims. So now you have rebel Muslims killing their Muslim leader. That's a problem. Egyptians came, not Egyptians came from Egypt, about 2,000 of them, 2,500 mostly, put Medina under siege, which had about 40,000 people, and put the Caliph himself, Uthman radiallahu anhu, his house under siege, eventually leading to his assassination and murder. He was an 80-some, almost 90-year-old, probably a lot. That caused, and that itself was an event that we're still suffering from until today. Ali was elected in that mayhem that took place in Medina because nobody thought that they would kill the ruler, the caliph. Ali took over and ruled. And he started by firing all the employees of Uthman. The previous administration was entirely fired. None of them remained. Everybody here fired. New caliph is in order. You're all out. Everybody agreed and submitted except the Syrians or Asham. The leader of Syria at that time, appointed in the time of Umar, was Muawiyah. Muawiyah was a Sahabi, and he's a distant cousin of Uthman. Two. Remember, you lived, that time was a society was tribal. Tribal society, right? And tribal society, you kill someone from the tribe, what happens? The tribe will have to take revenge. Anyone from the tribe, from any one of your tribe. Now, you say Islam came, and Islam should have calmed down these tribal revenges and avenging and all that. True, but still there. Muawiyah was the leader of Syria, or Sham. Sham is the Arabic word for Syria. Refused to concede to Ali except conditionally. And he told him, I'll recognize your leadership after you bring the killers of Uthman to justice. So, I mean, there was this argument now between Ali and Muawiyah, back and forth, unfortunately, where at that time, if you are to say, all right, this is the Arabian desert, I'm not very good in geography, but this is the Arabian Peninsula. So let's say here. This is Egypt. This here is Abyssinia. This here is Iraq. And this is Asham. All these became under Ali, almost, without Egypt. Egypt and Syria were a bit left out. Everything else became under Ali, except Asham remained under Muawiyah. And eventually, unfortunately, a war took place. The reason I'm talking about this is not that we can go into history. I don't really like to go into history. But so you understand where we came to be as Ahlul Sunnah or Sunni Muslims. So, the Ummah became like this. In a battle called Siffin, towards the end of Ali's life, so this became now with Muawiyah, and Muawiyah was a Sahabi, and this is the army of Ali. With Muawiyah were people from Asham, basically mainly Syria. Yani Asham, Syria today, but it really means Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, and what is today also called Jordan. All that used to be called Syria or Asham. Ali with him are the people of Medina, Mecca, obviously, and Hijaz, Iraq, Yemen, etc. Basically everything else that where Muslims were, except Asham. Ali was elected as the fourth righteous Khalifa. Muawiyah was simply the governor of Syria. So he works for the Caliph, but Muawiyah refused to concede to Ali, except after Ali then takes revenge or puts the people who killed Uthman to justice. The problem with that was this. There's a tribal society. The killers of Sayyidina Uthman came in and merged with different tribes, and they were from different places. There needs to be a process. You can't just pick up people from the streets and execute them. There needs to be a process and witnesses and all this. And Ali told him, there's a process for that. You need to submit to the process. After you follow instructions from me, you submit to the process, we'll bring them to justice. He says, you bring them to justice first, then I submit to the process. Here's the basic bottom line, basically. Well, eventually, Muawiyah refused to recognize the leadership of Ali. And that led to a war called Siffin, about a couple of years before the passing away or the martyrdom of Ali. All right. What were these called? Both groups, Ali and Muawiyah, what were the people called? Muslims. Yes? All of them. Whether you were with Muawiyah or Ali, you're still called what? A Muslim. There's no other name. But that's when the first split will happen ever in Islamic history due to this very confrontation. And from that point on, forever. I don't think it's rectifiable ever. The battle happened. The army of Ali was three components, if you were to say. One component was the remainder of the Sahaba and Tabi'een. That component, 1/3, because the remainder of the Tabi'een and the prophetic companions go with Ali. Right here. One other component was the Quran memorizers. Quran memorizers. Those are people who have memorized the Quran, and a lot of them at that time, this memorization of the Quran became very famous, very spread. Quran memorizers by the thousands. You're talking about 20,000 or so. Gathered and they became with Ali. All of them are Quran memorizers. Those guys there, they were called as such. The third component in Ali's army was the tribal leaders, or the tribes. The local tribes in Iraq. As far as Muawiyah's army was pretty consistent. It was all Shamis. It was all Syrians, basically. They fought off, unfortunately, in a second time ever, Muslims fighting Muslims. And it's a very painful era of history, so that's why I don't like to delve into it much. But it is nevertheless important because you're about to learn how the first split from being Muslim to being something else ever happened. And my recommendation for anyone who wants to read Muslim history, not Islamic history, please don't call history Islamic history. For my own feelings, don't break my heart. If you want to call history that is related to Muslims, other than the prophetic era, you call it Muslim history. The prophetic era is Islamic history. Other than the prophetic era is Muslim history. What does that mean? There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's what it means. Like any other human being. So, this war remained, how long was this battle for? 6 months. It's not like 1 day, 2 days. Alright? Here's what happened. Muawiyah went, and Muawiyah's army went and talked to those leaders, tribes and leaders, trying to sway them to their part. History says, Allah knows, money and other things and all that. So Ali started losing some of the loyalty of those tribes. Despite that, the most famous thing that happened is Ali's army fought hard to the point that those, and also probably some of them, gave up and were going to be almost killed entirely or defeated. What they did is the famous thing that's known. They raised the Quran leaflets on the spears. They put the Quran on the spears and they said, we don't want to fight, let's judge, let's come and mediate on the Quran. Upon being defeated, right? So now Ali's army became a bit what? Hesitant. What do? Do we fight them? Continue to fight them? Or do we not fight them? Those people here, the 1/3 of Ali's army, said they raised the Quran. Let's not fight them. Those people with Ali's army said, you know what, we fought them about the Quran from the beginning, Omar. Why did we fight them here? So that they can submit to the rule of Allah and the Quran and the Sunnah. All that caused lots of mayhem. Eventually, history speaks. At this, there were two people that came to represent. Amr ibn al-As. Amr bin al-As. And Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. Al-Ash'ari. Abu Musa came to represent the camp of Ali, and Amr ibn al-As came to represent the camp of Muawiyah. In what do they want? They want to mediate. Alright, so both of them are companions. Amr ibn al-As is a long-time friend of Muawiyah, obviously, and he's also kind of related. It's an Umayyad clan. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari is a Yemeni who used to be a Christian monk. And he had a very good voice. Like, you know, his voice was very known to be like very melodious. They came and they tried to mediate, basically, so to see how can we solve the situation between both. Allegedly, what history says is that Amr ibn al-As brought Abu Musa al-Ash'ari to a tent and they said, okay, you know what, let's do this. You renounce your leader, I renounce mine. And we let the Muslims choose a whole new leader from the beginning. Meaning, Abu Musa, since you represent the camp of Ali, you go out and tell people, Ali is no longer the righteous Khalifa. Then I come after you and say, Muawiyah is no longer a governor. So you all now choose a new Khalifa and let's start over again. Alright? Allegedly, that's what happened. At least that's what history says. So they came in and everyone came and they came out of the tent. Both armies are looking and Abu Musa went and Amr ibn al-As told Abu Musa, you start. Then I follow. You're more senior. Allegedly. Abu Musa went and said, look, we sat in the tent. We agreed that we will both renounce our leaders. I hereby therefore renounce Ali as the Khalifa. And he told Amr ibn al-As, your turn. Amr ibn al-As allegedly came and said, you heard what the man say. He renounced his, and hereby I affirm Muawiyah as the Khalifa, or as the leader. Allegedly. That's what history says. And now the situation that was gonna be resolved went into what? Total chaos, because no one had authorized you are authorized to negotiate a settlement, not to negotiate the status of your Khalifa. But here's the problem that led to the first secession in the Ummah. Now, and these people seceded. The Quran reciters at that point called Ali to be kafir. You, Ali, are no longer Muslim. Why? You agreed to mediate on the book of Allah. There's no mediation on the book of Allah. You either accept it or you deny it. By your agreement to mediate with those transgressors, that means you made the book of Allah subject to the minds and opinions of people. Therefore, you're no longer Muslim. The very 1/3 of very Ali's army and students, and Quran memorizers, entirely, all of them. And therefore, they called their own leader a kafir. They seceded, and this is the group we of and the Shia called Khawarij. Or Khawarij means in Arabic exiters, those who exited or left. This is now, this unfortunate battle marks the first split in the Ummah ever and forever, unfortunately, that people do not call themselves Muslims, they call themselves something else. So these people call themselves Ahlul Adl. We are the people of Adl, of justice, not just any Muslim. And the rest of you may not be Muslims. So that's the first takfiri movement or anathematizing movement in Islamic history, where a group of Muslims, that's significant in number nevertheless, leaves the bulk of the Muslim Ummah and calls the rest of them, they called Muawiyah and his people kuffar, and now they even called Ali and those who are with him also as not Muslims anymore. And eventually they also became violent against anyone who disagreed with them. They went into killing people, the shedding blood of those who disagreed with them, and they became a power to reckon with. And eventually they calmed down their rhetoric, but still, until today, and the remnant of Khawarij today are called the Ibadis, the Muslims, Ibadi Muslims. And those Ibadi Muslims are mainly, who knows? Oman. The Sultanate of Oman is mainly Ibadi Muslims. But where else? Where the Omanis went? East Africa. Where? Kenya, Zanzibar. That's where you have also Ibadi Muslims. Where else? You'll find them in Kenya. Those of you who are from Kenya, if you're from northern Kenya, you won't. You have to go backward to the coast. Yeah, Zanzibar and all that. And they pray with their hands down. That's how you sort of know, but otherwise you wouldn't know. They're also where? Libya, Algeria, Eastern Morocco, Eastern Southern. Right? Until today. Those are the remnants of what we call Khawarij. Today they still think that Ali is either not Muslim, يعني committed kufr والعياذ بالله, or he is he deviated seriously. So they don't like him. And they don't like Uthman either. They also call Uthman names. They like Abu Bakr and Umar. They love Abu Bakr and Umar. They don't love Ali, Umar and Uthman and Ali. It's very important, but they don't curse anymore publicly. They used to, but they don't. They're respectful publicly, but they still think Uthman and Ali are all deviants, and they should have been killed, and that they're righteous. And they'll never forgive Ali for fighting them, because Ali eventually sent Ibn Abbas to fight them. And Ibn Abbas fought them in a known battle called the Nahrawan, and many of them were killed. So they will never forgive him for that. And that's a Muslim sect today that rules Oman, the Sultanate of Oman, the vast majority of people there are Ibadi Muslims. They're good people in the sense they pray, you will not find any difference between you and them, except probably, like I said, they pray with their hands down like the Shia, because they're the students of Ali, this is the school of Ali probably.
So, the Quraysh, they left because they didn't think that Ali was comfortable because he was
He agreed to mediate
over the Quran.
over the Quran where they view that you fight them for the Quran because those guys were deviants. In their eyes, they were deviants and it's a trick. And if you agree that the Quran should be subject to people's interpretation, then you are disabling and abolishing and marginalizing the Quran, really.
It's not the best question, but are they wrong? In a sense, I think that their actions were wrong. Like their idea
Of course they're wrong.
the idea of the Quran is no question correct. It is.
But not for the memorizer, for the one who understands it. And when there's bloodshed, am I going to give you the benefit of the doubt as a Muslim? Because the Muawiyah people were not saying we believe in idols, were they? I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt to save your blood. Saving blood is very important. So when Ali had a chance to save blood, he agreed. Because the idea here is to save bloodshed. And then we can talk. If we sit and talk, then we'll sit and say, all right, let's see what the Quran says. Let's see your understanding is legitimate or what the Quran says is legitimate. That's how you solve it. But when the swords are pulled, there's no solving. There's only blood to be shed. And that's why these guys eventually, these Quran memorizers, and that gives you, it's very important for you to notice this. I put memorizers for a reason. They are, not just because it's their name. Memorizers and internalizers are two different things. A lot of people who memorize doesn't mean they understand anything they memorize. But they think they memorize because people put them ahead. Right? Is that relative to today? Sure. You memorize the Quran, you don't know anything, you'll be the Imam. Won't you? Especially if your voice is good. You have a melodious voice, you're the absolute Imam. You don't know anything, doesn't make a difference. It never changed. Memorizing and knowledge are two different things. Those guys became very violent. Yes, sir.
I think you covered the point. So how else would you understand the Quran without understanding
Through ilm. How do you understand the Quran without the Quran and the Sunnah? That means you have to have knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah, not just memorization of the Quran. And you have one third of Ali's army was all the ulama, the Sahaba and the Tabi'een. Those guys are unknowns. And even when you disagree, disagreement is not by doing takfir of the other and putting the sword on them.
So was their only solution is to keep fighting? They didn't offer.
They wanted to kill everybody on Muawiyah's side because they considered him kafir for fighting Ali at the beginning when Ali was right, because he was fighting for the right. And Muawiyah was being a rebel. In their view on that means you gotta kill him. And for Ali to agree to mediate rather than keep killing them all was a kufri action to them. Because in their view, Ali abandoned the ruling of the Quran that you should fight the transgressors and kill them. I mean, Quran does not say kill them, fight them. They view as fight and kill, eliminate. Yes.
So to clarify what you just stated about having ilm of the Quran and the Sunnah, it's like the difference between the Quran memorizers and the internalizers is that yes, they memorize these ayat, but do they actually
Do they understand the meanings and the indications?
and to implement it?
Practice is another story. Before you implement, what does this ayah indicate? Does it indicate that I'm obliged to do, that I'm recommended to do, that I'm neutrally permitted to do? I mean, right? That's what ilm is. Okay, let's go quickly so we can move. So now the Battle of Siffin marks the first split of the Ummah. It's no longer Muslims only. What kind of Muslim are you? From that point on, which is very early on, this is year 37, 36 of Hijrah, until today. Now, After that, it seems that Muawiyah was successful to bring some of those tribes to his side. Thus, his army the people with him were much more in that sense. And those guys went over here. That left 1/3 of Ali's army. From here, some of them started becoming a bit, maybe, seeing what happened, what the Khawarij did, what these guys that sold them out did. They started, having thoughts about, hey, what's going on with these people? And they realized that Ali is Ali and all this. So they became more Ali-centric. I don't want to say this is the beginning, but just a couple of years after that, Ali was martyred. When Ali was martyred, this group solidified, and they said, we want Ali's successors from his family. So Al-Hassan became the son of Ali. Right? After Ali's murdered them, Al-Hassan led. But who did he lead? He only led this now. That is what's left over of Ali's army. All those are gone. Those were still here, the enemies in a sense, and those were also the enemies, and 1/3 of Ali's army is what's left. Al-Hassan was a great man, but was not his father. And he made a deal eventually with Muawiyah, who now controls all this. I mean, that's a lot of people and most of the people. He made a deal with him to concede, or he made a deal with him to, okay, what I will do is, I will relinquish my leadership for you, so you can become the unified leader, on a condition: after you die, I resume my leadership. And on a condition you don't prosecute my father's loyalists. Right? They made this deal. Al-Hassan agreed, Muawiyah agreed, and that was year 40 of Hijrah, to be exact. That year, Al-Hassan, on behalf of his group that's remaining, agreed, put his hand with Muawiyah, and that became what is called Amul Jama'ah, or the year of Jama'ah. Why? Because finally now the Ummah went back to one Jama'ah. But is it really one Jama'ah or two? Two at least. Two already. Khawarij already think that Muawiyah is kafir. So to them, that's out of the way. Those guys were already out anyway. They're not part of that. However, some of the people here with Al-Hassan did not like what Al-Hassan did. They wanted Al-Hassan to continue fighting Muawiyah. Al-Hassan did not. He viewed that if he continues to fight, he's going to lose most of his people anyway. Muawiyah is way too powerful, and no one's going to remain. So he chose to do peace, to save people from being from bloodshed. All right, well, some of them may have said, you know what, let's wait. The deal is that after Muawiyah dies, Al-Hassan becomes the leader again, maybe he can do good. The reason is there's two views. Al-Hassan comes more from a religious background. Muawiyah comes more from a royalist background, like sort of a king. And some people appreciated that. However, before the death of Muawiyah, Al-Hassan somehow got killed. Mysteriously. And most historians say there was poison that was put in his food by one of his maidservants. So, now Hassan is dead. He was murdered. This group, right, so this was all Ali, this group now became more sort of die-hard First of all, some of them blamed Al-Hassan. He should have never accepted anyway. You knew he was going to kill. They blamed Muawiyah. They figured Muawiyah killed him. Why? Because Muawiyah wanted to put his own son Yazid as the successor. And the deal was, after Muawiyah dies, Al-Hassan comes. So long as Hassan lives, the son of Muawiyah, Yazid, will never be the ruler. That's their public agreement. Al-Hassan died, the deal is off. I'm not saying that's what necessarily happened. Possibly what happened. But that's definitely what the view here was. Other historians like As-Suyuti, they believe that Yazid himself killed Al-Hassan, not Muawiyah, so Yazid can become the leader. Alright? Anyway. Point is that Hassan was killed. Those people he became more, and they said, alright, well, we don't want a leader, anyone but from the family of Ali. So after Hassan came who? Al-Hussein. Al-Hussein was less flexible than Al-Hassan, politically speaking. So you know what happened. Yazid became the leader after Muawiyah. Al-Hussein refused to recognize his leadership. And therefore Hussein went to Iraq, and you know what happened. The army of Yazid, they slaughtered Imam Hussein and his family, and everyone were slaughtered. They're put on the spears. It's a very terrible situation that happened. That made this group of people under Ali go crazy. I think from that, and go crazy meaning become more family of Ali focused. This would be, I would say, year 61, the martyrdom of Hussein would be the point of crystallization of some group within people who we eventually called Shia. And they meant, what do they meant with that? They said the rulership of the Ummah must be strictly from Ali's children. Nobody can be the leader. Therefore, now we have two groups. We have the Khawarij and we have the Shia emerging as part or as a result of this. What about the rest of that stuff here? Well, let me put it this way. So those people here, in addition to all these people here, this is what's called now, they call themselves Ahl as-Sunnah. Eventually they call themselves that. Eventually. Why? Well, they're not Khawarij, right? They're not Khawarij. And they're not Shia. Notice, some of them were from originally those who were with Ali, and all of Muawiyah's people. And that's how we all emerged as what we are today. Okay, let me give you a 10-minute break.
So basically,
Yes, a good question before you go. Listen. Are the Khawarij and the Shia opposites? One hates Ali, one goes extreme in venerating Ali. Yes?
Yes.
Yes, but both are students of Ali. All the knowledge of the Khawarij is from Ali.